Hello, my name is Lizzie McMahon and I am taking Dr. Miller's online exercise physiology course. For my presentation, I decided to research the effects of different walking surfaces on horses' legs. I also looked into the best way to bring your horse back into work once injured and what surfaces produce the best and quickest results. So first I'd like to go over the different types of footing that's available now. There's a wide variety out there, from just good old grass pastures or trails to some newer technology such as GGT footing. Probably one of the most common types of footing seen is a mixture of sand and dirt in an arena. This is used at many different riding facilities and provides a cheap and safe surface to school your horse on. More recently, there have been some greener options that have been recently introduced into the equestrian world, such as arenas made with recycled rubber. This takes old tires and grinds them up to create a stable footing for horses to work on. Another newer technology seen in such places such as WEF is the new German geotextile, or GGT. This type of footing is different from the above types because it gets fluffier the more you ride on it, so you need to use a steamroller instead of an arena dragger to maintain this footing. Another benefit of this footing is that it has a high water storage capacity, so the arena doesn't get dusty when you ride. Now, since we've gone over the different types of footing available, I'd like to talk about the maintenance of your sand arena. Maintaining your arena is key to ensuring that your horse stays sound. Harrowing or dragging an arena creates an even place for you to practice. It also takes out the ruts that form when people practice on the rail. When horses go over a certain area so many times, the sand gets packed down in the arena, which creates a harder area for your horse to work on. Once dragged, even footing could make your horse move better as well as extend better if the horse is comfortable working on that space. Another thing that most barns practice is watering your arena. This cuts down on the dust, and it can also soften the sun-baked sand on warm days. Both indoor and outdoor arenas should get water to keep the dust down, or they should be treated with certain materials to keep down the dust. Another key thing is to remove large objects. If a horse hits a rock in just the right way, he could potentially injure himself or hurt his hoof. Another practice that you should use is picking poop up before it freezes to the ground. Footing is key to keeping your horse sound. We've all rode in really bad footing as well as really good footing. Obviously, a manicured sand or dirt arena that has been recently watered to keep the dust down is ideal, but there are times when we can't control these things. Sometimes bad footing is unavoidable, but if it is, don't ride. If you must ride in deep footing, remember to keep the workout light. Avoid jumping high as well as doing tight turns. If you're competing, you're much better off scratching your class and saving your horse's legs than winning that 10-cent ribbon. A ribbon only means so much. Your horse's health and legs should be above all. Now that we know a little bit more about the different types of footing out there and how to maintain it, I would like to talk about the effects of these surfaces on the equine extremities. In my presentation, I researched the effects of different footing on the range of motion, extension, and flexion of the horse's legs. In a study conducted by 5 veterinarians, the effects of walking on a treadmill, soft ground, and hard ground were observed while the horse was walking. The experiment called for 9 clinically sound quarter horses and thoroughbreds. They walked on 3 different surfaces: asphalt, a sand arena with a depth of 10 centimeters, and a land treadmill. To ensure consistency with the readings in the sand arena, the arena was always dragged after every test, handled by the same person, and was kept at a constant speed between 1 to 1.4 meters per second. To track the movement of the horse's limbs, markers were placed on their coat over each joint. These markers were placed at the proximal interphalangeal joint, the lateral condyle of the distal third metacarpal, the ulnar carpal bone, and under the carpal bone. One stride length of the horse was defined as the distance from the complete foot contact, heel to toe, with the ground to subsequent contact of the same limb. The data was calculated by the average of 5 strides taken by each horse. As shown in this figure, the highest level of flexion of the tarsus as well as hind flexion was achieved when the horses walked on the treadmill. The greatest extension of the forelimb and hind fetlocks was measured on the land treadmill. The greatest extension of the carpals and tarsals was seen when the horse walked on hard ground. As far as the range of motion goes, the greatest overall range of motion of the carpus and fetlocks was achieved on the land treadmill, whereas the greatest range of motion of the tarsus was achieved on soft ground. In Allison Northrop's article on equine limbs, 2 different sand track surfaces, harrow and rolled, were tested at the walk, trot, and canter. She took 9 different horses of varying heights, ages, and breeds and tested them on these surfaces at a maximum of 5 different times at all 3 gates. To ensure consistency, the exercise rider remained the same, and the track was always either freshly rolled or dragged before each test. In her experiment, the extension of the horse's limbs was greater when the track surface was harrowed or dragged than when the surface was rolled. This shows that even in sand footing, the hardness or softness of the ground matters on how well the horse being ridden will be able to extend. So now that we talked about what surface to rehabilitate your horse on, I'd like to talk about how to tell if your horse is sound or not. Lameness plagues each horse at least once in their life. Horses can get certain unsoundnesses by stepping in a rock and getting an abscess, running too hard in pasture and tearing a check ligament, or even by experiencing arthritic changes in their coffin joint. There are 5 key ways to see if your horse looks sound or not. The first is to see if your horse is bearing weight evenly on all 4 limbs. You can do this by just observing them in the pasture. The next is if there are any obvious abrasions on their legs. This means if there is any obvious cuts or skin missing from his legs, which could cause pain. But, like most horses, they don't like to give us a straight answer. Sometimes it's not as easy as looking at a horse's legs and seeing a visible wound. Sometimes it can be a tendon or a ligament issue, such as a bone tendon or a torn check ligament. In the cases of the above 2 injuries that I mentioned, you can usually palpate your horse's legs to see if there are any heat or swelling. Watch your horse's reaction as you do this. If he pins his ears or flinches when you touch it, that could be a sign of an injury. Also check for the symmetry of your horse's legs. Some injuries, such as splints, can go cold, but can still be an issue for your horse's range of motion. Another thing you can do is watch your horse at the walk and the trot. If he does not seem to track up or is bobbing at the walk or trot, seek professional help as soon as possible. When rebuilding your horse, the most important thing to remember is to start off slow. You need to make sure that you're building your horse up correctly. Starting off too fast could mean potentially hurting your horse's legs again. Some injuries only take a few weeks to heal, while others can take months and sometimes years. Most horses can go back into some sort of light program after 3 to 4 months of rehab, depending on the injury. If there's any heat or swelling in your horse's legs, cold hosing might be a good option to bring down the swelling. Also use leg protection such as SMB boots or polo wraps to support your horse's tendons and ligaments. These boots help to support your horse's legs and can prevent some abrasions or bruising that could be caused by a horse knocking a rail in a jump-off or overreaching while trotting. Once your injured horse is cleared by the vet, the best thing to do for your horse is to keep him moving depending on the injury. Some of the most common ways to rehab your horse include hand walking, individual pasture time in a smaller pasture, using a European walker or a treadmill. In the study that I read, the best way to increase your horse's range of motion and flexion is to use a treadmill. Now, most equestrians don't have access to a treadmill to rehabilitate their horse after an injury. That being said, the best method to rehabilitate your horse would be to work them on soft ground to promote flexion, as well as hard ground to promote extension. Of course, if you do have access to a treadmill, that would be the best way to bring your equine athlete back into work, since it provides the best range of motion as well as lets the handler determine what consistent speed of the horse should be moving at. In this presentation, I explain the different types of arena footing now available to consumers, how to maintain such footing, as well as how to rehabilitate your horse after an injury. I also explain the effects of a horse walking on 3 different surfaces, which can impact their range of motion as well as their flexion and extension of the tarsus, carpus, and fetlocks. These different surfaces affect all joints to a certain extent, but certain joints are used more when performing on different types of terrain. In this study, the treadmill had the best overall range of motion and flexion, whereas hard ground had the best overall extension. This data could be of great use to the equine veterinarians as they diagnose different joint injuries and prescribe the best way to speed up recovery time for our beloved equine partners. This is also useful to us as riders as we determine the best place to exercise our horses, from the schooling ring to the show ring. Thank you for listening, and I hope you gained some insight on how to rehabilitate your horse.